Well, I'm Jennifer Rosales. I'm a senior transportation engineer at Parsons Brinkerhoff. I work for PB PlaceMaking, which is a service center of PB specializing in coordinating transportation and land use. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Oregon State University, and this research that I'll be talking about today, the road diet research, started, actually I got the idea of doing the road diet project, or studying road diets, when I was working on a project in Vancouver, Washington, Grand Boulevard, and it was a safety improvement project, and we were looking at different alternatives. And one of the community neighbors brought the idea of a road diet, and that's when we started the research, looking at road diets and what research was out there. And then at that point is when I discovered that more research was needed in that area, and I applied for a fellowship through Parsons Brinkerhoff, which gave me the time and funding to be able to do the research for a handbook that I'll be talking about today. So with that, I'll get started with the presentation. What I'll be talking about is what is a road diet? What does that mean? It's funny, some of my friends joke and say, so what, you're talking about how to cook up roadkill? Or they say things like, are you trying to put together a book on what to eat when you're on the road? And I go, no, it's none of that. So I'll let you know, I'll be talking about what is the road diet. I'll also talk about the new research that we did, looking at livability and the evaluation that we did with some different case studies, and I'll be describing those case studies, what sites we chose, and how we did that evaluation. And at the end, I'll have some conclusions, and then we can have questions and discuss the road diet. What the road diet is, it's simply reducing the number of lanes. There's all different types of road diets, and the focus of my presentation and the research that I've done was on the 4 to 2 lane conversion with a center turn lane or a median. But also in the handbook there'll be examples of other types of road diets as well. But the focus of the livability research was on the 4 to 2 lanes, so that'll be the focus of this presentation. And this has been done all around the world, and it's shown to have benefits to all modes of transportation, to bicyclists, pedestrians, people driving their cars, freight, as well as transit users. This is an illustration of the 4 to 2 lane road diet conversion. And this illustration went from 4 lanes undivided to 2 lanes, and the extra space went to bike lanes. Extra space can also go to landscaping, wider sidewalks, on-street parking, and even, in some cases, it could be given back to the community as well. It's been shown there's been several research studies that have looked at safety benefits, and a majority of road diet projects are started from safety improvement projects, where they're looking at different alternatives, and then that's when the road diet projects come about, is a lot of them based on safety. What it does, it reduces vehicle speeds. You can know if in the 4 to 2 lane, you can only travel as fast as the car you're following. The significant reduction in collisions and injuries. Paper done by FHWA showed some reduction. Other research from Iowa shows even more reduction. And the case studies that we looked at, significant reductions, and I'll get into that later in the presentation. This is because there's reduced conflict points, as you can see from the diagram above. Also, there's improved sight distance as well, and also significant safety benefits for pedestrians and bicyclists. With pedestrians, they have less number of lanes they have to cross, as well as if there's on-street parking or a bike lane, now there's a buffer for pedestrians. And in the case with bike lanes, now the bicyclist has somewhere to be able to ride on the street. So not only safety benefits, but improved mobility and access, also improvement in livability and quality of life, which I'll talk about later as well. And then also it meets the community goals. And there's even some economic benefits as well, which I'll talk about in one of the case studies in this presentation. The road diet project can be done simply as a restriping project. This can be done just restriping. You can reuse the existing pavement and curves, which makes road diet projects very cost-effective way to improve the street. Also, you can do optional enhancements which increase the cost, such as implementing landscaping. You can widen sidewalks by moving the curves, narrowing the lanes by doing that. also adding street trees, or you can improve transit shelters as part of the project, which we've seen as well, and enhances the environment. With road diet projects, you always have to talk about traffic. Everybody's always concerned, well, you're taking a lane away. How's that going to impact capacity and traffic? In the 4-to-2 lane, the two-way left turn lane, it's been shown to have a minimal effect on capacity up to certain traffic volumes. There are some thresholds. It's right around the 20,000 average daily traffic range, so over the span of a day, 20,000 vehicles, right about that range. At that point, you may see traffic congestion and some potential traffic diversion. In those cases, traffic diversion is around the 2 to 15%, which jurisdictions have reported not to be a perceived problem. But you do have to be careful with the ADT number. You need to make sure that your traffic operates efficiently throughout the day. I've seen ADTs higher than 20,000. Tacoma Street is an example where the ADT is 35,000 vehicles, the highest one that I've seen. But with that one, the peak hours spread out over the entire day, or spread out quite a bit, making higher ADTs able to work. So you need to look at how your intersections are operating along the corridor, and also to trade-off too. And communities, and that I'll talk a little bit more about those trade-offs. But whether you want to design for 1 hour of the day, or how you want to design the roadway, and how you want it to function, and how you want it to function for all modes, not just for traffic. Some other examples of road diets. These two examples were taken from roads in San Francisco. The first one, Fell Street. This was a one-way street where they took a lane away and used that lane for bike lanes and on-street parking. The next example was a 3-lane roadway, so it had 2 lanes in one direction, 1 lane in the other, and they took a look at the operations and saw that it could operate efficiently with just 2 lanes. So they used that extra width for bike lanes and on-street parking, since those were very wide lanes to begin with. The case studies that my research covered was 2 case studies in Vancouver, Washington. We also had one in Clear Lake, Iowa, Athens, Georgia, Toronto, Canada, and Dunedin, New Zealand. These sites were chosen not only for geographic differences, but also they had varying project contexts as well, from different project lengths to the type of road diet project that was done, to the size of the community. For example, the road diet project in Toronto, Canada was in downtown urban setting through the middle of a university campus to the main street in rural Clear Lake, Iowa. So the purpose of the survey that we conducted a livability survey where we had got the public's opinions on factors related to livability and how they felt about traffic, how they felt about safety, comfort of being on the street, what kind of street life activities were occurring. We asked them what kind of improvements would they recommend to the roadway, and then also got reactions to the road diet projects. This survey was modeled from research that was done by Donald Appleyard in Livable Streets, which he conducted in San Francisco. And so we based our survey on similar questions and factors that he used in his Livable Streets book that he wrote. The survey medium varied for each the case studies. This was because we used a web survey in areas in Vancouver, Washington, and Toronto, Canada, where we did a door-to-door survey in Iowa as well as Dunedin, New Zealand. And unfortunately, no, I didn't get to go to Dunedin, New Zealand. I wanted to. I went to Clear Lake, though. So the first case study we wanted to look at is one study to be able to compare the road diet studies to is one that was a potential road diet candidate, but it was a 4-lane roadway. So this roadway, it's a project I worked on, Grand Boulevard in Vancouver, Washington. It's an arterial with 12,000 average daily traffic. It had high crash rates along the corridor. It was also a transit corridor as well. As you can see, there's a bus at the bottom picture there. And when we gave the survey out to the public, the public said yes, slower speeds are desired. They wanted to slow traffic down. They desired street improvements. They wanted a change in the street character itself. They didn't want to see the same character that's out there. So this is a great candidate for a road diet project, and the City of Vancouver plans to convert this when funds are available, and it's on their list, just waiting for funding at that point. And what they're planning to do is resurface the roadway. It needs resurfacing. So at the point of resurfacing is when they're going to do the road diet project, which we found is very successful for projects with the resurfacing, because the stripe, you don't have to worry about stripe removal, and it's a very clean conversion. Fourth Plain Boulevard in Vancouver. This was a successful project converted back in 2002. This is an arterial with 17,000 ADT, so a little bit on the higher end. With this, it added bike lanes. It went from 4 to 2 lanes with a 2-way left turn lane, and added bike lanes with the extra width that it was able to use from the, reducing the lanes. This, as you can see in the top photo, bicyclists trying to maneuver next to traffic. Very scary. That would not be me. And the second photo below is what it looked like after, with the bicyclists on Fourth Plain Boulevard. This project also, when it was done, also improved ramps to meet ADA, and also there was utility work that was completed as part of this project. This project was residential with commercial fronting Fourth Plain on one end, and then on the second half was mostly residential and residential fronting Fourth Plain Boulevard as well. Results for Fourth Plain Boulevard after the road diet project. The number of crashes went down by 52%. Traffic speeds went down by 18%. The City of Vancouver put out traffic tubes in the neighborhood. As part of the project, they put out traffic tubes before counted the neighborhood streets. And then after, they put the same tubes out, and what they found is no traffic diversion. They couldn't find any traffic diversion resulting from the road diet project. So the neighbors were very happy to hear that from the neighborhood association. Significant improvements for pedestrians as well. In this photo, you can see the pedestrian environment at the top, and then now there's a buffer. Pedestrians I think the photo on the bottom, they had just gotten off the bus. Walking on Fourth Plain. Also, with Fourth Plain Boulevard, the Washington State Department of Revenue did a study. They looked at the businesses that were adjacent to Fourth Plain, what their gross sales receipts were before and after the road diet project, and compared that to other areas, comparable areas within the city. And what they found, and this was during a time of a recession as well, and what they found is the businesses along Fourth Plain Boulevard, their sales increased by 3%, and the businesses at the comparable sites around the city decreased by 10 to 25%. So you can see here the road diet project didn't hurt the businesses at all, and maybe might have helped them, although I'm sure there were other factors involved.
Lane width increases, right, with the road diet?
No. Because you use that extra width for a bike lane, bike lanes, or on-street parking, and in some cases you may narrow them if you decide you'd like to narrow.
Okay. So it does reduce the speed that way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So with Fourth Plain Boulevard, what we found when we did the public opinion survey is the residents answered and said, yes, it's now easier to cross the street. They felt the street felt safer when they crossed it. In addition, they also noted that there's major home improvement projects now going on in the area. It's starting to revitalize, and those were the results that came out of the survey. Also, people now hanging out in their front yards, on their front porch. So significant improvement in livability, and the community very happy about this project. And when asked if they would recommend this a road diet project to other streets within the city, when appropriate, 67% said yes, 21% said maybe, and only 12% said no. Baxter Street.
I just want to add a previous slide. Sorry. Thanks. On the previous slide, what was the neighborhood buy-in before the project?
Okay. the neighborhood buy-in before the project, half the neighbors, I'm not say half, but there was neighbors that were skeptical, and then there were neighbors that were very much in favor of it. So as part of the what the city did for the neighborhood is they said they developed a community accord, what the purpose was, and that's when they said that they were going to take, what they were going to do is they were going to do these traffic counts. They were going to look at the businesses, which is why the Washington State Department of Revenue did their study. They were going to report back to them, and if it didn't meet their objectives and the goals that they set out, then they told them they would put it back the way it was. So it met the goals, and the community was happier afterwards. But at the very beginning, there were neighbors that were skeptical. So the city sort of made a deal with the neighbors and said, we'll do all of this for you, and we'll measure this for you, and we'll come back. And they came back, and that's what they found. So you're welcome.
Here you're saying the number of crashes decreased by 52%. So what are those crashes, like vehicle-to-vehicle crash or?
This, what I'm showing here, this was overall crashes, so vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-pedestrian. We also have other data that shows the number of pedestrian and bicyclist crashes decreased as well. On this particular slide, I'm just showing the overall number. In the handbook, it gets into more detail and breaks those crashes down. Baxter Street in Athens, Georgia. This is an arterial, 20,000 ADT. This project was a safety demonstration project in 1999. And this project was done simply as a restriping project and added bike lanes. The only other improvements that were done as part of this project were improvements to the traffic signals, retiming the signals as part of this project. No turn lanes were added at any intersections. It was just simply 4 lanes to 2 lanes with a 2-way left turn lane and bike lanes. It was also along the transit corridor as well. And Athens, Georgia, if you're not familiar, is home to the University of Georgia. So students, they have what they call townies that live there. Very diverse community. And the results from this study found that the overall number of crashes went down by 53%, and that at the unsignalized locations, so those locations that are mid-block, so between the signals, those went down by 60%. There was some traffic diversion experienced, and they measured it at 4%, but where this 4% went to, there was a parallel route to Baxter Street, a much larger route and a route designed to carry heavier traffic loads that they wanted the traffic to go to anyway. So the 4%, they saw the 4% decrease, and then they saw the 4% rise on the parallel route to Baxter Street. When looking at the survey, the respondents answered yes, it's easier to cross the street. The majority responded easier. They also responded that they've noticed it's slower speeds. They've also said that the home and business improvements in the area, that there's been major renovations being done after the road diet project. They also said the perceived number of lanes and the street width is just right. We had asked, do you think the number of lanes is not enough, too many, just right? And they answered just right, and same with the street width as well. And when asked if they would recommend this to other streets in the city, 47% said yes, 33% said maybe, and 20% said no. Dunedin, New Zealand, Kaikorai Valley Road. This is an arterial with 10,000 ADT. It was in an area of mostly residential with businesses along the roadway. Also, it was a connection between some of the suburb areas to downtown Dunedin, so a route that goes between the two. This was a 4-lane roadway and went to 2 lanes with a center turn lane and median. They alternated the turn lanes and median. There's a median you can see in the photo there. And they used the extra width for cycle lanes and landscaping. And it's interesting the different terminology and spelling with New Zealand with cycle lanes instead of bicycle lanes. And curb lanes is not C-U-R-B, it's K-E-R-B. So very interesting. And And also, they're on the other side of the road as well. So this also, they added parking in certain areas. Actually, I'm sorry, they kept the parking. There was already on-street parking, and they maintained that on-street parking. The project length was 1.5 miles. This shows the cross-section of the resultant road diet cross-section. And as you can see, I don't know if you can read those numbers, but the lane widths are very small, 9.5 feet in width, so very narrow travel lanes, cycle lanes, 5 feet, and the existing parking remained as is with a very large median, 13.5-foot median in the middle, or a turn lane that went wherever at the major intersections. The results here, the crashes went down by 30% overall before and after the road diet project. A significant increase in the numbers of pedestrian and bicyclists now walking and riding on Kaikorai Valley Road. When asked if they felt the number of lanes was just right, not enough, or too many, the majority answered yes again, just right, as well as with the street width. They also noticed a significant number of major home and business improvements, and when asked if they would recommend this to other streets within the city, 42% said yes, 31% said maybe, and 27% said no. Clear Lake, Iowa, US 18, so this is the main street through town in Iowa. This is a state highway with an ADT of 12,000. This was done simply as a restriping project in 2003. When this research was done, US 18 was going to be improved in 2 stages. So phase 1 was the restriping, the road diet piece, and phase 2 was adding turn lanes at the major intersections, so adding right turn lanes where right turn lanes were needed. And also, the second phase was supposed to improve their traffic signals as well, since the operations, the timing needed significant improvement. So this study was before the second phase, which I think is really necessary when you're doing a road diet project. You really need to look at if there's any other improvements besides just restriping that need to be done, how your intersections are going to operate. Otherwise, you may get pushback after if there's an intersection not operating because maybe it needs a right turn lane or the signal needs to be retimed. So this is one case where that second phase really needed to happen sooner than it did. And the second phase just was implemented this last summer. So in this case, the extra width went to shoulders, and there were no existing sidewalks for pedestrians along this roadway. So it's a very different example. It's a rural example. This one's looking more at speed and safety than helping pedestrians or bicyclists, since there's no sidewalks even on this highway, which would really be a significant help, especially in the areas where they have a lot of businesses. Results from the road diet project: crashes went down by 65%. Aggressive speeding, which is people speeding 5 miles an hour or more over the speed limit, that went down by 52%. So significant reduction there. There had been a fatality along US 18, which was one of the reasons that Iowa Department of Transportation looked at what they could do along US 18 and decided to do the road diet project there. Iowa said there's still adequate traffic operation and good mobility, although there was improvements needed at those intersections and at the traffic signals, which were just done this last summer. There was mixed perceptions with the survey. Several of the people in the community thought the striping was confusing. You could still see the striping below, as you can see from the photo on the left. You can see some of the old lanes, so the striping removal was confusing. And then the way the transitions were in and out were very confusing. And that's another key point with road diet projects. You need to make sure your transitions coming into the road diet project and coming out work effectively, and you've got proper striping and signing as well. And it was confusing to me. I actually got caught going, oh, wait, I need to transition now. So it was confusing. And also this one, when the survey was done, it was completed within a year of the road diet project. So in this case, I think livability benefits are still to be realized for this project. St. George Street in Toronto, Canada. This is a minor arterial with an ADT of 7,500. The traffic volume on St. George Street's remained relatively constant since 1993. So this roadway actually went through 2 phases. In 93, it went through the actual road diet phase of the project, where it went from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. And then in 1996, the city decided to do more of the optional enhancements. They moved the curbs in, they widened the sidewalks. At that point, they also used alternative paving materials in the crosswalks. They added landscaping, as you can see in the these are both after photos. Landscaping. This is one of my favorite streets that we researched. Very great pedestrian-friendly roadway. Bicyclists using the roadway. It didn't take long. All I had to do was put out my camera at bicyclists, and there was skateboarders. It was very easy to catch a bicyclist in the photo and pedestrians walking. As you can see, even the bottom, there's a bicyclist and pedestrians. So very friendly street. Here's the cross sections of the road diet project, St. George Street. This is actually after they narrowed the lanes as well. 10-foot travel lanes are used on this street, 5-foot bike lanes, 5 foot on one side, 6 feet on the other. So 10-foot lanes and 5 to 6-foot bike lanes. Results from the road diet project. The crash number that you're looking at, the 40%, was done after the road diet project was completed, not after the lane narrowing. What they found is the reduction in crashes went down most significantly after the road diet conversion, and not as it was nominal. It wasn't very. They didn't see that big decrease after the lane narrowing. Where the decrease was after the road diet project piece. So it went down by 40% after the road diet project. Number of pedestrian and bicyclists significantly went up. No traffic diversion was experienced. It's on a grid network as well in downtown. It's now easier to cross the street. Perceived speeds were much slower afterwards. Respondents said, yeah, it feels safer. Also, again, noticing a significant increase in pedestrian and bicyclists. And this when we asked if the respondents would recommend having a road diet project on other streets within the city, we also asked at other universities as well. And 81% said yes, 12% said maybe, and only 6% said no. So very, very successful project here. The handbook that I've been developing. This is a table of contents shown here. This will be available, anticipated to be available first part of January. The previous studies, I took all the past research that's been done, compiled that, categorized in different categories: traffic operations, or traffic operations, safety, also examples, and highlighted different examples, and then also lessons learned from other road diet projects. And then the case studies chapter goes into the research that I did on livability and what the results were from each of those case studies in the survey, with conclusions at the end. And then Chapter 4 is the guidelines for identifying and evaluating candidate sites. So it gives guidelines, things to look for. It uses some of the past research that Keith Knapp at the University of Wisconsin did on evaluation guidelines. Also takes a look at design concepts and some different ideas that you can do, as well as looking at green streets and different types of road diet projects. And in summary, road diets, they do meet the transportation need for not only vehicles, but for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users. Significant safety benefits can be accomplished with road diet projects, as well as livability. They're assets to the community. They're also can be compatible with the environment, cost-effective, and in the end, when done at the appropriate locations, it's better than it was before. And with that, I'll entertain questions. Oh, okay. Grab that one.
Can you mention what the impetus was in these different case studies for the road diet to happen? Was it the municipality? Was it the community that wanted it? What was the mix there?
It varied from project to project. The Fort Plain Boulevard project started with, that was a city project. The Grand Boulevard project was the community. They actually wrote the grant application for the city. Most of them were jurisdictions looking at improvement projects or safety projects, but other ones were the community coming forth and saying we need to do something here, and the city listening. Oh, okay. Go.
I have two questions. I won't be a hog. I'll ask one now, and if there's time, I'll ask the second one later.
Okay.
You said at the beginning you also studied one-way streets, and your presentation focused, and you said it would, on a conventional 4-to-3 conversion, which is one that's been studied the most. I'm very curious about the one-way ones, because personally, in large urban areas, I see far more potential on the one-way streets. I've been to, like, Dallas, which converted its entire city to one-way streets, I think. And there's been a few successful examples that I know of here, and I'd like to know if you looked at enough of those that you can make a pretty good case. Because the nice thing about a one-way street, you're only talking about one lane out of quite a few that you need to remove. So if you could address the one-way situation a little bit, I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
Great. The focus of the book was the 4-to-2, although we do have one-ways in the book. The areas where I found one-way conversions was here in Portland, as well as San Francisco had quite a few. And those are all included in the handbook in both chapters 2 and 4, but we didn't have several. We didn't have over 10, for example, one-way conversions to really be able to evaluate traffic, that sort of thing, more in terms of here's some examples, here's how to do it, these great applications, here's results.
So just weren't enough to really, sorry.
Just weren't enough to really do it.
Right, exactly. Go ahead.
Is it possible for you to summarize what makes a really good candidate street for a road diet? Maybe 4 or 5 points, and then maybe also a summary of what sort of red flags there are in applying this, the types of things you'd look out for where it might be a really bad situation.
Okay, that's a loaded question. Okay, so some potential good cases. Well, one is the 4-lane undivided roadway. It's an unsafe roadway. So that roadway could get bigger or it could get smaller. There's different things to consider. Number one is the community, what they want to see. Who are the users? Are there pedestrians that want to use it and they're scared? Bicyclists, what the land uses are. Number of access points. Is it limited access, or is it you have several access points where there's a lot of vehicles trying to make turns in and out? Do you need a turn? Do you need the center turn lane? Do you need a median? Kind of what the overall environment is. So you got to really look at the project context and where you're at, and so yeah. So project context is big. A good candidate site's one where there's high speeding. There's a need. The community wants slow speeds. They want to have bicycle facilities or better pedestrian facilities. It's potentially on a transit corridor. Those are good applications. And then also, if you're looking at doing the 4-to-3 or 4-to-2, or you're looking at one-ways, all different examples in terms of what could be good. The handbook gets into all these different points, number of access points, users, community. The biggest thing is a balance. There's a balance between operations and safety, and a balance between the community, users, and operations. And in a lot of cases, it can still operate adequately when you take lanes away. It's just how much the community is willing to live with. Also parallel routes is another big thing to look for. If there's a parallel route that potentially is underutilized, that is a better candidate to carry the traffic as well. And the other thing is by improving the pedestrian and bicycle facilities, maybe people won't even get in their cars. Maybe they'll make that local trip on a bike, or maybe they'll walk. So that's another positive spin there as well.
In reducing in projects that are either reducing lane widths, and I think I'm thinking more about lane width than number of lanes, there has been a recent pushback from, say, the trucking community or whatnot to increase, to make sure that they have minimum lane width, to make sure they have ability to access, whether it's street trees or other issues that could impact their ability to operate. Did you see any issues or hear any issues about that from the different communities, freight communities or business communities? And did you see any movement of trucks off of these streets onto other streets in these projects?
Okay, that's a good question. Fort Plain Boulevard, I'll use that example. That's along a truck route. It connects Interstate 5 to the Port of Vancouver, and so it's a highly traveled truck route. So with that, they took the lane away. They did keep the same lane widths. They didn't reduce the lane widths, and then they. So I think the lane widths there were 11 to 12 feet, and so they kept the lane width, didn't reduce the lane width itself, and trucks were still using it, and there's several trucks out on that route. But the community feels much safer out there now that they have a bike lane and a buffer, and they've moved the trucks in, and they can get in a turn lane and don't feel like they might get rear-ended by this big truck coming down the street. In terms of actually looking at the width and what the freight community feels, we didn't get into specifics of lane widths and the trucks themselves.
Did you come across any information on how transit times were affected in 4-to-2 conversions, or was that not an issue?
That wasn't an issue, yeah. We did, in some of the examples, bus pullouts were added because they didn't want to block the lane, but that wasn't an issue in the studies that I saw.
Totally sold me on the handbook there that you're working on. You said it's going to be available in January?
Yes, that's correct.
And who from?
It'll be available actually through, if you can give me your contact information. Parsons Brinkerhoff gave me the funding to be able to do this. They award one fellowship per year, and I was the 2004 fellowship recipient. So what we do is I think we print about 1,000 copies, and I'm able to designate where those go. So if you give me your card, and you could write Handbook on it, or I have a stack going, so just give me a card after the presentation, or write your name down with Handbook, and I'll make sure you get a copy.
You mentioned, I guess, several benefits to the road diet, and I'm just curious, either in your opinion or in that of others, if there's any significant drawbacks that you could outline to the road diet?
Okay. When done, I guess, it's a tough one, because the examples I looked at all were successful for different reasons. Mm-hmm. The Iowa example, there were several people, because it was a main street through town. It was also being used by users just going through town. And so a drawback there was people that just wanted to use it as a highway through town, and now they had to drive a lot slower. So it was a drawback for certain users. For those users wanted to just drive really fast. Where the users in town, it made it unsafe for them. But I didn't look at any examples that, all the examples that I looked at were all positive benefits. But it done in an inappropriate location, it would be a bad example. For example, a location that maybe needs to be a 5-lane roadway, it's more functioning like a boulevard. That would be a bad example.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from one of our web viewers, and it says, the road diet reduces the number of crashes, but does traffic bog down more often? And is this something that can be done on a large scale, for instance, through the Beaverton-Aloha area?
Okay. Can you repeat that one more time? It was thanks.
Crashes are reduced, but does traffic bog down more often? I guess it's a congestion question. And is this something that can be done on a large scale? And the example is throughout the Beaverton-Aloha area. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but
I'm very familiar with that highway, Robert.
Okay, maybe Michael can help.
Well, if you're talking large scale, like on every city street, I'd say no. You need to look at each street separately and how it functions within the street network. Because if you did it everywhere, then you don't have any hierarchy of streets, and you won't be able to have a functional street system. So there was the congestion piece of that as well. which oh, go ahead.
Well, I think my comment would probably be, would tie back to the ADT. In other words, if those streets in Beaverton have got 12,000 ADT, then they're a much better candidate than if they're at 30,000, in which case they wouldn't be.
Right.
And that's probably part of your hierarchy too.
Exactly.
Also. Right.
There's a hierarchy of streets you need to maintain. Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And so it could be, yeah, if it's got low traffic volumes, it's 4 lanes, you can reduce it, or it's 3 lanes and wants to go to 2, then it would be a good candidate. Yeah, that's another way to, yeah. Thanks.
Well, yeah, good. My question is related to that. Oh, still on. Okay. My question is related to that because I'll speak both. Oh, you just press it once and that's it. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anyhow, I'll speak both as an employee of ODOT and a private consultant who's proposed many, many road diets, both within ODOT and without. And Gary here has helped me on quite a few. And the resistance always encountered when you're hitting the upper limit of what you find acceptable. And we do make the argument that it will operate fine most of the time, but yes, maybe at the peak it may bog down a little bit. And you touched upon that as far as, community values, and the community was willing to accept that. But we often run into resistance from either a traffic engineer, who just will refuse to accept any increased congestion whatsoever, or a stated policy, which is often used at ODOT, that we cannot accept reducing capacity at all. I don't know if you know that. This is really what Scott was referring to, that the truckers got a law passed saying that ODOT cannot reduce capacity on a freight route. So I'm wondering if you've encountered that kind of resistance, and I'm sure you have, and how people got around it when you know that overall it will succeed.
Very good question. And yes, you often do find that resistance. Some ways that in projects I've worked on we've got around it is showed examples, done presentations similar to this. We showed here's before, after, and then showed a simulation model of how it may operate. Showed the peak hour, go, okay, yes, you will see congestion. Then showed like a regular hour during the day. This is how it operates. And let them know, yeah, this is a trade-off. It's, what are your values? And then there's, the bicycle advocates, or people that have kids that they want to be able to walk down the street. And those are the people that stand up and go, we want to be able to walk down the street. So a lot of open houses, a lot of public education and awareness goes into it. The project in Washougal, for example, we gave a similar presentation and showed simulations and showed what benefits could be realized if a road diet project was done. And it really is looking at the community values. That's number one. You touched, yeah, that's exactly what you said, Michael.
Yeah. I'll give you the worst example ever. I was giving a workshop in Albuquerque, New Mexico. 5 people from the New Mexico DOT traffic engineering section were there. They all walked out when I said, yes, it may increase congestion at peak period. And they just walked out of the room. They just didn't want to hear it anymore.
Very, very, very tough challenge. And it's a tough obstacle. And it's hard to, when somebody has their mindset, no, I don't want to see any increase. If you're doing an improvement project, it's got to improve operations. That's a really tough to get over.
Yeah, when you measure the benefit in terms of safety or in other aspects, have you looked at how the benefit changes seasonally? Because I guess my feeling is that maybe in the winter there are not enough bikers or pedestrians to make the system worthwhile.
Well, if we're, it's kind of sound like kind of a little bit of a two-part question. Number of crashes, when we looked at before and after, we looked at, it was over the winter area. We used comparable time periods, both before and after, to be able to compare the two, so they're not apples and oranges, they're apples and apples. In terms of bicycle use during the winter, it's having a bike lane would make it safer because now they feel like they still can get out there in the winter, whereas by not having it at all, then it makes it even scarier, especially in inclement weather, like heavy rains and stuff. So definitely it's a benefit and for a bicyclist, and by not having the facility discourages a bicyclist from going out there. I think in the back.
You mentioned that the community wrote the grant for Grand Avenue improvement in Vancouver. Which community organization was it? Was there a site-specific study, and if so, did the city perform it, or was it the contractor? And also, was the mayor Pollard's office behind it for political support?
Very good question. The neighborhood association was the, I can't remember the exact name of the neighborhood association now, but I can get back to you if you'd like. The neighborhood association, they helped write the grant and gave it to the city staff, and the city staff took it, and then they wrote the draft, and then the city staff took the draft, wrote up the grant application, and were able to get the funding for the study of the project. And then the project, the city staff hired a consultant to do the work, to look at different improvement options, and they hired Parsons Brinkerhoff to do that work. So we were the consultant doing the work to look at different improvement options. And then, and now the city would like to implement the road diet project on Grand as soon as they have funding available. But they don't want to just restripe it. They want to do it as part of a resurfacing project because Grand Boulevard right now is in the condition where it needs to be resurfaced. And also, in addition to that, they are planning on putting in pedestrian refuge islands along the corridor and improving and working with C-Tran, which is the transit provider in Vancouver, to improve bus shelters along the route as well. And in terms of the mayor's office, I am not sure. I know the city staff works, and I'm sure the mayor's updated on different projects going out throughout the city. So I'm not sure exactly about the mayor's office, if they were informed. I never saw the mayor at any of the public open houses. So I'm not sure about the mayor's office exactly. So.
You'd mentioned that the Tacoma Street project had ADTs over 30,000, I think, and but the peak was spread out perhaps more. Have there been any unintended consequences that you're aware of on the Tacoma project, or increases in diverted traffic through the neighborhoods there that weren't expected?
Okay. The Tacoma Street project, the peak hour, very successful project, and there was a study that was done by other consultants that looked at the before and after effects of the project. And what they found is overwhelmingly positive responses. The peak hour spread. In terms of traffic diversion, there was some, very little. There was some measured, although not perceived as a problem by the residents. This project also, this was a phase 1 of a phase 2 project. Phase 2, they'd like to add bike lanes to Tacoma Street, which was only just the road diet piece was completed as part of where they did on-street parking as part of phase 1. So in terms of the literature that I saw on Tacoma Street, I didn't see anything that pointed to a negative result, but I haven't gone out and asked each neighbor along Tacoma.
It's part of my commute route, and I cut through the neighborhoods before, and I cut through the neighborhoods now, unfortunately. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, you mentioned community values or prioritizing values and whether or not this kind of project would be successful. And you mentioned economic benefits as one of the potentially side effects that these projects have sometimes seen. I think that economic values have really risen in the community, many communities, especially in transportation infrastructure spending. So I'm wondering if besides just some sort of noting increases in construction, if in your research or in your literature review, if you had come across economic indicators of transportation investments, and just sort of to give you insight, where I'm coming from is that I'm not sure if transportation engineers or even policy officials have really done a good job linking economic development and transportation projects. So I'm wondering if you found anything in your research.
Yeah, it's very limited. You're right. The Valencia Street in San Francisco, there was economic benefits measured as part of that road diet project, as well as the Fort Plain Boulevard one in Vancouver, where they looked at specifically economics. But unfortunately, transportation engineers, they'll go through, put the project in, and then they have to they have to focus on other projects. They can't go back and say, let's do an economic project, although I'm sure they'd love to. So, or take a look, be able to study the economics. So unfortunately, there's not very much data in terms of the economics piece out there. Very limited.
I just wanted to have you clarify who was involved in your survey, and also if you had any responses to the negative answers, like any reasons why they didn't like it. Oh, yeah. So the participants, who was participating in the survey, and reasons for not liking the road diet.
Okay.
And maybe what group that was that said no more often.
All right, so the first piece was the survey and who participated in it? Is that okay? So the survey, depending on the location, it was surveyed different ways. The Toronto site, for example, because it was in the middle of a university campus, that actually we worked with the University of Toronto as well as the City of Toronto, and we had on their homepage a link to the survey. So that had the biggest response of all surveys, and we asked at the very beginning, trying to get demographics. Are you an alumni? How long have you been familiar with the street? So we could get a feel for if they were able to see the Road Diet Project back before 1993 or after. So that one, big response. A lot of people visiting that homepage. They get thousands of hits a day. In terms of Fort Plain Boulevard and Grand Boulevard in Vancouver, what we did is we sent it out to every resident and business owner within a certain radius of the project. So we were getting people within the community. The people we didn't get are people traveling through as a commuter on a commuter route, such as the gentleman that travels on Tacoma Street. Or doesn't travel on Tacoma Street, that is. So the Vancouver studies, it was a radius, as well as Baxter Street in Athens, Georgia. In Dunedin, New Zealand, the city also used a similar radius from the project. And what they did is they did a door-to-door where the city staff themselves went out and hand-delivered the survey on each person's door, and then went back and collected them at a certain point in time, and then other people mailed them back to the city. Different ways we did the survey depending on the location. In terms of the bad responses, or the negative responses, I should say, we tried to correlate between the people that answered no, they didn't want to see the survey, with how they felt about traffic speeds and other reasons, and it was hard to try and tie that together. It did look like there was some ties to those who didn't like the road diet to those who want to travel faster. So there was some with speed. Speed was a big one. Okay. But other than that, it was really tough to see. And then in the Iowa example, because we were doing that one door-to-door, and I had students helping me, and I was part of that survey, it seemed as though those who wanted to drive fast and now they have to slow down were the ones that were answering no, they didn't like it. So, go ahead.
The main negative we get is, and
it's lit.
Yeah, right.
He's lit. He's got superpowers.
Thank you. Set me up, don't you? Anyhow, the main negative we get, and if you look at it from a strictly geometric, physical, arithmetic point of view, it's probably true. It can be a bit hard to make a left onto the road that's been road dieted, because first of all, the lane is 6 feet further away. It's just a single lane. With a 4-lane, if traffic is relatively quiet and everyone is in the far right lane, you can move into the first lane, or the inside lane. After the road diet, you only have one lane to move into, making a left turn. And that's the major complaint that we hear. And again, it's back to that balancing act. You just have to acknowledge that. It's much easier to make a left from the highway. It's easier to make a right from the highway. So 3 out of the 4 main turn movements are easier, and 1 may be more difficult. And I have to admit, once I did try to make a left onto Tacoma, and I ran into just that. I had an incredibly long wait, steady stream of traffic. I had to wait for a gap in that 1 lane. And I funded that project, by the way. So I kept very patiently at the wheel of my car, said, Michael, be a good boy, don't get impatient. But yeah, again, it's acknowledging that there are downsides and admitting what they are. And just, again, community values. You're willing to wait a bit longer that one time, knowing at other times it'll be easier.
Absolutely.
We have another question from a web viewer. Have you come up with any explanations for why the number of crashes decreased after the road diet?
Any explanations why they decreased after the road diet? Several reasons, and I could go back to my safety slide. One big reason, traffic speeds slower, number of conflict points reduced, better sight distance, less number of lanes to have to negotiate. The weaving, yeah. You can take away the weaving with 4 lanes. Traffic weaves around to get around vehicles, stop to make turns, so you get rid of the weaving issues. Oh, yeah, and the number of, thanks, Mike. Michael's cueing me here. The number of rear-end crashes significantly go down because the rear-enders stop to make turns, and they get hit. Now they can move into their own lane to make the turn. Yeah. Oh, no.
I actually just had a quick question. Will your handbook be available via the web when it's completed?
Actually, it may take a while to get put on the web. There are handbooks. Yeah, it will be on the web. It may not be in January. The first set out will be those that I've designated, and then other key offices. But it will be out on the web. It just may not be until spring. I'm not sure exactly what point it gets on the web. It's a good question.
I was wondering if you did any forecasting studies to see if the traffic increases, what the benefits will be, to project it into the future. If once the traffic increases on the arterial that you're trying to.
Okay. With the road diet project case studies we looked at, all of them also looked at what the traffic will be like, and typically it's a 20-year horizon. They took a look at 20 years from now, how it will operate, with the typical growth, traffic growth, but also taking into account that now there may be some mode shifts as well in terms of traffic users, and also then still looking at the community and is it built out, what kind of environment is it in. If it's in the middle of an area that has a bunch of empty land, it's projected, well then maybe you need to look at how that's going to be. But a lot of these were already in a lot of built out communities. But they did look at the 20-year forecast and what they're looking at there as well.
I have one question. You said that the traffic is diverted sometimes to parallel streets. In a few cases, there was diversion to some other street. So were the neighbors in those streets, did they complain about why that it had an adverse effect on the other street? And was there any study to study the crashes on the other street that has been adversely affected? Okay. I guess I'll take the Baxter Street example, where there was a parallel route and about 4% converted. 4% of the traffic did divert to the parallel route. The parallel route was a much bigger route. It's built more like a boulevard, highway. It was built with a higher hierarchy to be able to handle that type of traffic, and the traffic that diverted were neighbors that just decided to take that route instead. So, in the case studies we looked at, we didn't see any adverse effects from the community saying people are cutting through on my street and complaining about it. In terms of, I'll talk about just the 5 that we looked at. In past literature, there's traffic diversion that can be experienced, and I haven't seen any huge negative impacts from jurisdictions saying the neighbors all hate it, because then those road diet projects will probably convert back at that point. But I haven't seen any literature saying that it's been a big problem. And Michael, I don't know if you've experienced that as well. Yeah, so no big problems. No.
Probably sick of hearing my voice, but we have another web viewer question, and maybe this is more for Michael, but I'll read it anyway. The Broadway-Weidler Road Diet appears to have been very successful. Commercial revitalization has occurred. What would it take to convince ODOT to do the same for Grand MLK, another couplet with 4 lanes in each direction, similar ADT?
Talk about loaded question. I heard it has fewer ADT than the Broadway-Weidler couplet. Again, it's just that resistance that comes from a policy says that shall not reduce capacity. And
It's not your road anymore, Michael.
It isn't?
No.
All right, thank you.
Oh, no, yeah, apparently, I think that the jurisdiction, the couplet
Wonderful.
is now in PDOT jurisdiction,
That's
so
the
they can
best thing you can do.
start twisting different arms, yeah.
Can we do to convince PDOT? I guess I'll update the question.
I think that would be a great thing for the transportation planning group to take up, and I would be happy to provide contact information.
Oh, so you're an evasive ODOT.
I'm a doer, not a planner.
Doer, not a planner.
We like each other.
Could I kick in there also, which is the Streetcar Inc. is looking at putting a streetcar down that area. So there might be some connections for this web viewer, or for organizations like mine, which is the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, to work with Streetcar to potentially change those streets.
Excellent.
That's much nicer. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Can I respond to the comment about future projections?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, we should have turned the tide 20 years ago as far as a paradigm shift, always assuming that planning for the future means an increase in traffic and we have to accommodate it, and that's what our profession's been about for like 3 generations now. What I like about the road diet is you stop that thinking, you just freeze it right then and there and say, this is it. This is only what we're going to get on the street. There will be no more traffic on the street. And cities around the world have been doing that for 20, 25 years now, just putting a stop to increase traffic and actually looking at decreasing traffic. So again, it gets back to values. Yes, if you do a road diet, especially like the Toronto example, you start moving in the curbs. And you just say, find another way to accommodate the traffic. Either shift to other modes or accept more congestion. And again, that is something that's very hard for our profession to accept.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Michael. And that's very good. And the Toronto example is, traffic volumes remain the same since 1993. So they built it and said, this is it. Yeah, very good.
Do you find more support politically in suburban areas versus urban areas for these types of projects?
That's a tough question. We didn't actually look at politics of suburban versus urban. So it's a tough question to answer. The examples we looked at went from suburban areas to urban areas. So that was one area. We didn't actually look at the political differences between the two. Yeah.
Do you know of any cities, and especially among the case studies, that have gone the extra step now of maybe taking an inventory of good candidate streets for road diet? Or does it have to really kind of be community-driven in some case? Have some of those success stories gone the extra step and looked at their city and said, okay, this is when we'll resurface these streets, we'll do a road diet then, that kind of thing?
It's a good question. In terms of cities looking for road diet projects, I think there's probably road diet advocates that look for roads that aren't performing the way they could be for a community. I know the Iowa Department of Transportation, they've done a significant number of road diet projects, so I'm sure that they've been looking at their roadways and what's 4 lanes and how they can improve that and take back some of the mistakes that were made like 50 years ago. So there's like Iowa DOT is one that would be looking at that kind of thing. And they're doing it as part of their safety office. So their safety office is looking at roadways that are unsafe and how they can improve it, and road diet's one way. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
The examples that you showed looked like there were a variety of different locations, but I'm wondering, were most of them commercial areas, or were they a mix of commercial and residential? Did some of them just go through residential areas? Does that make a difference in kind of that assessment of whether or not it's a good candidate street?
Well, the reason why we looked at these actually were different mixes, and we looked at different mixes to see if maybe there was a better candidate than another. And what we found is, depending on there was a residential one, like Fort Plain was both business and residential, and that was positive in the end. The residents now cross the street. And they was also being used by trucks, so a little bit different of a mix there. A lot of them did have residential, actually most of them had residential, at least backing if not fronting. Toronto, though, was in the middle of campus, so it really didn't, in terms of what was land use was exactly adjacent to the road diet projects, didn't impact whether it was successful or not. What does is what type of users might be using that street. So maybe it's a commute route. Maybe there's bicyclists that want to use it, but it's all industrial. So the land use really didn't, we found that didn't really have an impact on the success of the project at all. So.
My dad told me to ask you why your research took so long.
You're not from the PB Board of Directors, are you?
My dad's GBRant, and he thought it would be fun if I asked.
It's good question. It's taken about a year and a half to do the work. It's tough because we only get a certain amount of time to be able to work on the research, and so a lot of it's weekend time, and also I have other projects that I'm working on as well. And with project deadlines and all of a sudden big project loads, you have to, the one thing that slides was the research. So it's now been put at the front, and so that's why it's being done now. So, and that's why the handbook's coming out. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. And before we thank Jennifer, I just want to mention that next Friday we have Joel Franklin, who's a PhD candidate in urban planning and design at the University of Washington, speaking on a social justice perspective on transportation policies, comparing distributions of welfare. So thank you very much, Jennifer.